I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History. In 1978, the landmark documentary Word Is Out was released. Its premise was simple, but for its time, revolutionary. Gay men and lesbians talking openly about their lives. I watched it as a newly out college sophomore, and it blew my mind. The film was a milestone in the history of LGBTQ visibility, and for Pat Bond, who was one of the people featured in the film, it was a career breakthrough. Pat was a stalwart of San Francisco's lesbian community and an actor with local theater companies. During and after World War II, she'd served in the Women's Army Corps, or the WWII, a branch of the U.S. Army that was created in 1942 to allow women to perform essential non-combat duties. In Word Is Out, Pat painted a memorably funny portrait of the WWII as a place teeming with lesbians, and she became an instant hit with viewers and reviewers alike. But her account also provided a sobering example of the U.S. military's cynical and cruel treatment of gay service members. Men and women whose sexual orientation was tolerated or overlooked in wartime to meet manpower demands, but were later purged from the ranks, their lives upended, often ruined. Pat Bond was born Patricia Childers in 1925, an only child in a lower-middle-class household. When she was in her early teens, her family moved from her hometown of Chicago to Davenport, Iowa. Pat was in high school when the U.S. entered World War II. She vividly recalled being summoned to her school's auditorium to hear President Roosevelt's Day of Infamy speech following the attack on Pearl Harbor. In 1945, after Pat had spent 2 years at a local Catholic women's college, she was old enough to join the WWII, one of the more than 150,000 women to enlist during the war. Pat served stateside as a medical tech until late 1946, when she was sent to Tokyo, where U.S. General Douglas MacArthur directed the rebuilding and democratization of post-war Japan. In September 1990, Pat sat down for a recorded interview with my friend and colleague, Allan Bérubé. Allan was a community historian who wrote extensively about the experiences of gay men and lesbians in the U.S. military during World War II, including for his influential book, Coming Out Under Fire. He spoke with Pat for a planned documentary based on the book. At the time of the interview, Pat was seriously ill with emphysema. But, as you'll hear, she was still a force of nature, with her sense of humor, big heart, and husky chuckle very much intact.
You voluntarily enlisted in the WWII. Was that unusual among the women that you knew?
No, it was the only way you could get in. And the men would see you in the railway station, because by then you were sort of in uniform. And they would say, "You asked for it, sister," you know.
You were among the first real generation of women to be able to volunteer.
Just before us was another generation.
You were kind of a pioneer, though, right? Doing that. How did you feel about that, being among the first?
Wonderful. I was going to be with all these lesbians and away from my parents. And we weren't rich enough to send me off to college, you know. I could have gone, God knows, then. But I wanted to be with Dykes, of course.
What happened on the day that you enlisted?
Well, I went down to the hotel there, the Black Hawk Hotel, which was the fanciest hotel in Davenport. And they had the recruiting sergeant, right? There she is, all right. Well, I knew a lot about Dykes, although I had not been with many Dykes, or if any. And I looked at her, and she had her hair all done up the way they did then, you know. But there was a Dyke if I ever saw one. So I took to calling her honey, which was fine. She liked it. She called me honey. As soon as I was sworn in, I was like, "Call me ma'am, sister." Well, what happened to honey?
Did she ask you about if you were a lesbian?
Well, no, they asked us later about that when we went through the Army psychiatrist thing. And the Army psychiatrist said, do you prefer the company of men or women? And you said, men, of course. What is a woman? You know? Because you knew damn well they were looking for queers. And you didn't want to get bounced for that. And of course, what we didn't know was that the Army psychiatrist could have cared less if you were gay or not. And so then they said, first of all, I had to lose 20 pounds to get in. Fool that I was if I had known. But I got in, and we were shuffled off on the train to Chattanooga. And we were stationed in our barracks. You know, as we came in with our suitcases and stuff, I heard a voice from one of the barracks say, good God, Elizabeth, here comes another one. And I had no idea I looked gay. I still don't think I do. But apparently, and I liked that, a lot, because my mother had stuck me in this little frock that I was forced to wear. A little bolero jacket, a little skirt, you know. While some of the dykes were in drag in men's clothes, you know. And there I was, and I wanted desperately to be a dyke. I did not wish to be a femme. So it was hell. Everybody thought I was a femme.
You mentioned that the day that Roosevelt died was a big day.
Oh, the day that Roosevelt died was a very bad, sad day for all of us. We were on the train going to basic training, Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. And he had been president all my life, you see. Well, since I was about 4, I suppose. And the officers were all wearing black armbands. And as we got closer to Fort Oglethorpe, you could hear these 48-gun salutes going off. And we didn't know what had happened, and they told us. And we were all crying, and, you know, the president was dead. So that was a hard one. Then they got us there, and here we all are, right? And we're schlepping down with our suitcases. Okay, form, what do you call a line in the Army? Formation. We looked at each other. They don't bother to tell you, you know, what this is. They said, line up. So we line up. No. Shoulder to shoulder. Foot to foot. Now, squads left. Squads left. And there was the first sergeant whose name was Junior. Junior. She looked like as she advanced on you, she was going to strangle you. And might have. But very handsome dyke. Oh, God, our uniform had creases. They were handmade uniforms with the silver whistle, and she had the whole number. Every femme in the camp was hot for her bones, you know. And we, of course, the dykes were all jealous as hell of her.
So did you meet any other dykes in the WWII?
Oh, yeah. I walked into Fort Oglethorpe, and 90%, we went right to the mess hall. And there's about 500 tables. And seated at the tables were all these women in fatigues with boots, with their feet up on the table saying, hey, Henry, pass the salt. It's like, this is the real thing. Now we're not kidding around anymore. These are real dykey boos. And we were all, of course, 20, 22 kids. But we thought we were right in the swim of things, you know. And then I was sent to medical training. So, of course, they sent us, the policy was to send you as close to home as you could get. So they sent us to Schick General Hospital in Davenport, Iowa, because it was about 50 miles from where I lived. And they had this Army hospital's corridor slant, you know, for wheelchairs and all that shit. And there was a wonderful faggot. And he had jungle rot, which we had never seen before. These were Asian diseases. And every time he got up out of a wheelchair, he'd start to sweat, and then it would break out. So he stayed in the wheelchair all the time, and I'd get on the back of his wheelchair. We'd get at the top of those slanting corridors, and I would scream, "Bonsai!" And we'd all go wheezing down, he and I. And they had a Halloween party. Do you know that bastard was so brave? He went in full drag to the Halloween party, and they all thought it was wonderful.
Who did he go as?
Mae West, of course. Who else did you go as? With the big hat with the feathers, you know. And I was his companion. I was done up as a maid, a butch maid. Because I wasn't going to sit still for the little hat and apron, no.
Who were the patients in that hospital?
The patients at Chick General were all men who had been in the South Pacific. And some of them had been in prisoner of war camps for 5 years. And they never expected to come through it, so they were just overjoyed. And they were 6'4" men weighing 105 pounds, you know. And do you think that we could keep those bastards home at night? They'd take off. They had medals down here. They had, you know, wouldn't wear them. They'd all go out and get blind drunk. You couldn't stop them. I mean, men who had been locked up for 5 years, come on. And that's the first time I saw a naked man. Naked, my dear. There he was. Because you had to get bed baths, you know. And alcohol rub-downs and all that stuff. And we'd work 10, 12 hours a day and have to come home and hang our uniforms out the window because they stank so. Because the patients stank. You know, they couldn't help it. And you had to say to yourself when you first started, these are the men that are really sick. Now you just forget about any feelings you might have. You know. So we would hold them, kiss them, tell them how much we loved them. That's all you could do then. They didn't have penicillin, you know, or any of that stuff, which was what finally cured all those jungle diseases. And then they put me on the venereal disease ward. Well, me, out of a Catholic girls' school I'd gone to for my first 2 years, I'm in here with all these guys with VD. So you had to give them round-the-clock shots. And so it was, we really felt patriotic, and we felt we were doing one hell of a job, and we were. I mean, 10, 12 hours a day, come on.
What were you sent over to Tokyo for?
General MacArthur brought us over there to let Japanese women see what free American women looked like. Well, when we got off that boat, 500 of us and 90% queers, and obviously queers. You can imagine his response. It was like, what? We went over on the good ship Comfort in November. It took 3 weeks to get there. We were violently seasick, all of us. And the beds were bunks, 3 layers. So the top bunk would vomit, and all 2 would get it below. Then we got to Tokyo on this, awful, covered with vomit, stiff. So we get there, and they're playing the WWII song as we got off the boat, a band. We didn't know that the WWII song was the Colonel Bogey March. We had no idea. But they're playing da-dum, ba-da-da-dee-da-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da. And we were like amazed, you know.
Do you remember the words to the WWII song?
Duty is calling you and me. We have a date with destiny. Ready. The WWII is ready. Their pulse is steady. The world to set free. Service. We're in it heart and soul. Victory is our only goal. We love our country's honor, and we'll defend it against any foe. That was it. But we didn't have any jobs to do because the medical staff was all filled. So I used to sit in the Daiichi building where MacArthur was headquartered and play cards and drink beer with the GI I worked with all day.
How did the witch hunt start?
Well, first of all, the war was over, so they decided that they could then get rid of all the queers. So they started on us, and they took secret pictures of us, and they tape recorded our telephone conversations, and they read our letters. And then they would call us up for what was called a summary courts-martial. which meant they didn't have to have a full courts martial where you had a defense. So we had nobody. We were just on our own. And they would ask you these weird questions, like, you were seen dancing with Private so-and-so on such and such a date. Well, we did dance together because it was perfectly permissible. We had an all-women's band wearing men's uniforms with bow ties and stripes down the side, and nobody ever said a word about it. And they took 3 or 4 bed checks a night to see who was in whose bed, finally. And they found quite a few people in other people's beds. But these were lesbians that were doing this, you see, lesbian officers. And then they had guards all around us, 6-foot male guards. Wouldn't let us out of the barracks. And I went to an officer who we liked. In fact, it turned out she was going with a dyke, but nobody knew it. And I went to her and I said, Captain Mack, they're going to kill us all. I know they are. And I could still see my tears dropping on her Pallas Athene that she wore on her collar. And I said, they're after us and they're going to kill us all. I know they are. Look what they're doing. And she said, no, they aren't, honey. They're not going to kill you. I said, but they're going to tell my parents, which we were also terrified of, that your parents would find out. And then she was transferred out. We never saw her again. So goodbye, our only comfort, And she was a major, and she was the only officer that gave a shit about us at all. In fact, they all could hardly wait to rush and turn us in. And we could have stood up and said, yes, but you're gay. You're living with a woman. But we were too afraid, I guess, to do that. And then they set us against each other. And that worked pretty well, you believe me, because the word would go down, but Junior Fox is a spy. And it turned out later I got to know her, and she was no more a spy than I was. But once she got that reputation, she was in the soup, to say the least. In fact, it was Junior Fox who went out and had a baby. She got so scared. Because we had a song that went, if you're nervous in the service, tired of powdered eggs and spam, have a baby, have a baby. So Junior did just that, because it's the one way you could get out honorably. And she went out and had a baby.
Tell the story of what happened with Helen.
So Helen was a friend of mine, and we used to talk once in a while. We weren't close friends, but we were pretty close. And they called her in and said, unless you give us the name of 10 of your friends, we'll tell your parents, and we'll dishonorably discharge you. And in those days, of course, dishonorable discharge meant that they burned your uniform, they took away your passport. It was like a felony. You weren't allowed to vote for so many years. And of course, God forbid, if you tried to get a job, if anyone found out you had a dishonorable. Fortunately, with women, they never thought to ask. But, so Helen didn't know what to do. She couldn't figure it out, and she killed herself. And she was 21 years old. Because she couldn't figure out any other way to handle it at all.
How did you handle that? How did you feel when she...
None of us went to work. We couldn't bear to. We sat and drank beer and wept. And one of the big bull dykes got the CO that was largely responsible for what happened, beat the shit out of her, which was pleasant. Oh, that was so nice. And they would tell us to go to work, and we'd say, fuck you, because by then you didn't care what they did to you, And talking about Helen, and then they made the grave error, worse than anything, of having a military funeral for her, with taps being blown. And and I'm sure her parents never found out, which still hurts me, how their daughter really died. Maybe they wouldn't want to know, but she killed herself. The Army killed her, in actuality.
At that point, how did you feel about your patriotism in wanting to be in the military?
It all diminished rapidly. First of all, it diminished when we got to Japan, and we found we liked the Japanese so much. And they liked us. I loved the sound and the smell of Japan. I began to hate everything this country stood for. Just hated everybody. I didn't even want to speak to an American man. Or, I hung out with Japanese. My lover, my roommate, worked for the Japanese movie company there. She knew, what was his name? The great Japanese director, Kurosawa. And so I hung out with them mostly and learned to eat seaweed and, had a great time with them and learned Japanese marching songs. God help us all. Here we are, American wax in uniform singing Japanese marching songs.
Can you talk about the change from when you were enlisting and then how you...
Yeah, when I enlisted and I wanted so badly to be part of the war, and I cared so. And when we were at Chick General and working so hard and caring because our guys were really suffering. And then that. And it was like, my God, what have we done? You'd think we'd murdered 20 people, We hadn't done anything, really. We hadn't really genuinely fucked. We didn't know how. So it was all gone, all my love for country. Although I felt that being queer was my fault, somehow. And that I could have changed that. Because I really thought that queers were monsters somehow, that we were. And I think all of us felt that way. Most of the women that went through that, or the 2 or 3 I met later, told me they didn't have an orgasm until they were 40. Because of all that harassment and the confusion around your budding sexuality, So it was, I suppose, the worst time of my life, and I never really got over it. But I think one of the things I was proudest of was caring about my friends. In the midst of all this shit, I was just as worried about my friends as I was about myself.
Pat was luckier than the other servicewomen who got caught up in the Tokyo Purge. A couple of years earlier, she'd married a gay man, Paul Bond. The subterfuge helped her pass as straight and shielded her female partner from suspicion. Pat asked to leave and was sent home with an honorable discharge. Nearly all 500 women in her company were charged with homosexuality, though relatively few received the dishonorable discharge they'd all been threatened with. Many were given a medical discharge instead. The lesbian officers who'd collaborated in the witch hunt were transferred or allowed to resign. The company was disbanded. After her memorable appearance in Word Is Out, Pat wrote and starred in several successful one-woman shows, which she toured across the country. One of them, called Murder in the Whack, dealt with her wartime experiences. But Pat found her greatest acclaim with Gertie, Gertie, Gertie Stein is Back, 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 in which she played lesbian icon Gertrude Stein. In 1980, the show was broadcast to a national audience on PBS. As one reviewer noted, if Gertrude Stein were alive today, she'd be playing Pat Bond. Pat Bond died just 3 months after her interview with Allan Bérubé on December 24, 1990. She was 65. Many thanks to everyone who makes Making Gay History possible, including producer Inga Detaya, photo editor Michael Green, and our social media producers Christiana Pena and Nick Porter. Our studio engineer was Kathleen Conti at CDM Sound Studios. Fritz Myers composed our theme music. Special thanks to our founding editor and producer, Sarah Birmingham, and our founding production partner, Jenna Weiss-Berman. Thank you also to the New York Public Library Manuscripts and Archives Division for their ongoing assistance. The audio included in this episode is drawn from the 1990 oral history interview between Pat Bond and Allan Bérubé. It's part of the GLBT Historical Society's World War II project papers and was provided courtesy of the GLBT Historical Society. Special thanks to the Society's managing reference archivist, Devin McGee, and much more. Season 15 of this podcast has been made possible with funding from the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, Ty Ashford and Nicholas Jitkoff, Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, Mitchell Drazen, the Calamus Foundation, Christopher Street Financial, the Marcus Family Foundation, the Kipper Family Foundation, Rick Hoffman, Bill Cux, Rick Fischel, Esmond and Jerome Harmsworth, the Embry Family Foundation, Mary Cadigan and Lee Wilson, Robert Gober and Donald Moffat, Greg Adgate, the Eichholt Scott Family Trust, Maureen Bennett, Hal Brody and Don Smith, Robert Dodd, and Kathy Dancer. To learn more about the people and stories we feature, head to makinggayhistory.org, where you'll find links to additional information and archival photos, as well as episode transcripts. I'm Eric Marcus. So long, until next time.